Hello, party people, and welcome to Office Hours. This episode is going to be a little different. There are a few questions piled up in the queue that not only are they good questions, but they're also going to take some time in order to answer. So I've been purposely holding these aside. You see, every now and then I do like a speed round, either in video or on the blog posts with stuff that can be just answered in one line. I kind of love doing that because then it leaves me room to really focus on the questions that require a little bit of nuance. So the first one that's highest voted out there has only got 2 votes. There aren't a lot of high votes on these. The first one is, did Database Administrator Brent ever have to support a version of SQL Server that Microsoft had end-of-lifed? Yes, absolutely, because when you're a full-time employee, you don't usually get the authority to say things like, this version is now out of support, we're done with it. So he said, any tips on discussing this issue with management? Okay, so one of the things that I love to do was put out a support matrix. Because I got so used to vendors saying, here are the things that we support. Well, as a database administrator, I said, here are the things that I can support. I can support, for example, anything that's going to be that I'm going to be on call for that needs to be up production 24/7. That needs some kind of high availability. I need some kind of way to fail over to another SQL server because servers break. And I can't drop everything on the weekends and do a long extended troubleshooting session when I only have one SQL server with no safety net. If it needs to be 24/7, I need a safety net. I need some ability to fail over elsewhere. And what I found was by laying out some guidelines like that, it helped me set a new conversation. When someone wanted to come to me and deploy a new SQL server, they would say things like, well, we're bringing in this internal truck handling application that's going to say where our shipping trucks are at all times. And I'd say, great, here's a little one-page document that I put together about what we do for production servers. Let me know if you have any questions. And then that helped project managers just go, oh, okay, we have a process for this. This is what's normal. And when you say it as like a process, then it's less about negotiations. Now, that doesn't fix existing servers. So when you have existing boat anchors, and a lot of the stuff out there relative to this question is going to be things like SQL Server 2008, 2008 R2, that Microsoft has stopped supporting, but you still have to support. My discussions, whenever someone would say, hey, we have a support question on SQL Server 2008, we got this production instance, whatever, I'd be like, oh man, the one that's out of support? Oh, I got to be honest with you. That thing's so old. It's like 14 years old now. I don't work with those very often. I got to be honest. None of the tools that I use support that. I just need to set expectations. It's going to take me a lot longer to troubleshoot this one. It's going to take me some time. And then when I would even describe, I'd be like, oh, based on what you're discussing, you're facing a memory grant issue. Let me take a minute to describe to you how I would troubleshoot that on any of our supported versions. On our supported versions, Microsoft has learned over the years that memory grant issues are a problem. They added new columns to the DMVs to help troubleshoot that. Unfortunately, on this old version, I don't have those tools. So I'm going to describe to you how much longer the troubleshooting process. If you continuously throw those roadblocks up and you keep explaining to customers, I say customers, like internal customers, why you just can't do as good of a job of supporting those SQL servers, then it helps to start to give them justification as to why they need to move on to the new ones. The thing is, though, I'll also be honest that with a lot of those old versions of SQL Server, they do just kind of work along like cockroaches after a nuclear apocalypse. They're not totally broken at this point, and if performance was important to people, they probably would have moved to newer versions. So the squeaky wheel approach may not be that effective here. Next up, Ahsoka asks, what are your favorite past summit presentations from your prior years? So when I think about sitting in the past summit or really any conference, it's extremely rare that the session is the thing that I take away. The thing that I usually take away is the speaker. Like, oh, this speaker had a really good technique for this, or this speaker is someone that I want to pay more attention to, or they were very creative with the way that I explained it. Hi, I'm Ajay. Check out the info there at the top of the screen there for asking questions. So for me, it was much more about speakers. And so I'll tell you some of the speaker memories that I've had. I remember Donald Farmer did a keynote at the PASS Summit several years ago, back when he still worked for Microsoft, about doing data analysis on the Titanic survivors using Excel. And I remember being so excited about it that I waited until after the session was over and I talked to him in the hallways, and he just sat down on the floor and we were just doing data analysis in Excel. And it was just this really interesting thing talking about the Titanic survivors. Another one that I enjoyed quite a bit was Rob Farley. Rob is out of New Zealand and has really interesting ways of presenting. He also does stand-up comedy in his spare time. And Rob did a session where he walked up to a completely blank SQL Server management studio and told the story of how statistics work using queries against AdventureWorks. Now, in order to do that, you have to know the statistics forwards and backwards. He's just typing out queries and he's saying, you see how this works. Well, you have to know the database so well in order to do that. And that was really one of the first sessions that I ever saw where someone just started from nothing and wrote the whole presentation as they went. Now, that made it seem like it was very off the cuff and unprepared. So I remember talking with Rob afterwards, and he was really frustrated with the survey feedback he got, where people were like, doesn't look like he really, had anything prepared for this session. And I'm like, you have no idea how much he had to prepare in advance to know the flow and the things that he was going to hit in order to be able to satisfy his presentation's objectives. Without having a script laid out and with making it appear that he had no notes whatsoever. So those were a couple of standouts in my mind. Let's see here. And so that gives you an idea of how I think about those kinds of sessions as well. Next up, Can asks, hi Brent, I have 3,000 databases per SQL Server. When I need to restart, the SQL service isn't stopping. It's waiting in the stopping mode. I did disable logins and nothing changed. Okay, so what I would step back first and ask is, how healthy is this SQL Server even when it's not trying to shut down? My worry would be that you're having really slow storage writes. And when you need to shut down 3,000 SQL servers, if you got a bunch of dirty pages in memory that SQL Server needs to flush out to disk, it can take a really long time in order to do that. So the first place that I'd look is, what's the health of this thing just normally when you're not trying to shut it down? And if storage is already screwed, you might have your answer there. The next thing that I would ask is, are there any queries that are running? Because it's entirely possible that you've got an application that leaves connections open and leaves transactions open. Rolling back work in SQL Server is single-threaded. And so you can run into issues where there are a whole bunch of transactions left open, and as you shut it down, SQL Server's killing all kinds of transactions and rolling those back. Those can take absolutely forever. So if you search for how to see which queries are running in SQL Server, I've got a couple of videos out there using spblitzwho, spwhoisactive, so that you can go see what's happening as SQL Server shutting down. Then finally, the last thing that I would say is just make sure that you're patched, that you're on a currently supported version of SQL Server and that it's patched well. Just because I start to get nervous anytime I see thousands of databases on a server, that also tends to be the kind of environment where people are like, we can't take any downtime, so we never patch anything. And they're running on SQL Server 1942, so just make sure that you stay current. Because Microsoft has targeted environments like that with a few fixes. I don't remember the exact builds offhand. And next up, this one was one of the ones that actually prompted me to want to do it or do a session where I switch over to demos. So this is really interesting. When I'm doing filtered statistics, do you basically have to use a full scan? It appears that the where clause for filtered statistics is applied after where a patch, I patch, especially since, yes, so many are. It appears that the where clause for filtered statistics is applied after the table sample, so you end up sampling the same data as the main statistics. Okay, in order to do this, what I'm going to need to do is create filtered statistics on a table. So let's first go out and see. This is probably going to be a 30-minute long demo explaining what's going on here. And I haven't rehearsed this at all ahead of time, so we're all going to see interesting things. So what I'm going to start out with is I'm on SQL Server 2022. It's not that I need to be, I just happen to have that up and running for my demos. So I'm going to start with the Stack Overflow users table, and I'm going to start by dropping my indexes, drop indexes, and then I'm going to say select top 100 star from DBO users, just to show you the kind of thing that's inside the users table. Stack Overflow users table holds exactly what you think it holds. A list of people who are logged into Stack Overflow, have posted a question, posted an answer, and so forth. Look at the location column. So this is basically free text. People can type in here anything that they want. Sometimes they put in something witty, like on the server farm. Sometimes they put in city and state. Sometimes they put in city, state, and country. Sometimes they just put in country. There are all kinds of things that people can put in there. So there are so many different locations. This leads to estimation problems, even if I've got statistics on location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an index on location. I'm going to say create index location on DBO users location. Now, there are only about 9 million rows in the users table, and yet, because of how creative people are, there's still a whole lot of statistical outliers on location. For example, if I say select top 300 location, count star as recs from DBO users, group by location, order by count star descending. Let's go find the 300 most popular locations at the Stack Overflow database. And as you might expect, a lot of people don't bother to fill them out. Out of the 9 million rows, 7 million of them are basically blank. And then you have the big ones that you might expect: India, Germany, China, United States, and so forth. In order to predict, like if I run a query that says, and I'm going to start a new window and pop it over here horizontally or vertically. If SQL Server needs to predict how many people match a given location, so that if I say select top, or I'll say select display, we'll do reputation. Reputation, display name, ID from DBO users, where location equals, and I'm just going to pick a location. I'm going to say London, United Kingdom, order by reputation descending. If I write a query like that, SQL Server has to guess how much memory it's going to need in order to sort all the people who live in London. So to do that, he needs to build an execution plan, and he needs to estimate how many people live in London. In here, when you see 20,000 rows brought back of an estimated 20,000 rows, that 20,000 number there, both bottom and top, tells you that SQL Server did a fantastic job of estimating how many rows are going to come back. The reason he knew, and I always use a guy's name and voice for SQL Server because he's dumb and stubborn and he refuses to ask directions. He's all, trust me, I got this, when he doesn't usually got this. In order to do that, SQL Server used statistics. DBCC show statistics, DBO users, location. When we created an index on location, SQL Server created a statistic with 9 million rows and sampled all 9 million of them. Kind of like how you wish that pollsters, when they want to ask the population like who they're going to vote for, you wish that they would call everyone in the country and get an accurate answer. Often they don't have time for that, so they resort to sampling. More on that in a second. But if you read all of the rows in the table in order to figure out exactly what's going on, my query says London, United Kingdom. It just so happens that there's a statistics bucket for that. Statistics only have up to 201 buckets in order to describe the data. So here, SQL Server says if you're searching for London, United Kingdom, London is enough of an outlier that we have a bucket just dedicated to London. It says 20,057 rows. Now, this works really well as long as your location is in the top, say, 200 or so, because the statistics histogram has up to 201 buckets. Isn't that cute? 201 buckets to describe, it's a mystery, to describe the shape of the data. But what happens when you go further than the top 200? For example, if I scroll down in my population list, I asked for the top 300. It looks like Brisbane, Australia, for example. Brisbane, Australia has 1,310 people. Well, do they have a bucket in the statistics histogram for Brisbane, Australia? And they do not. Which means that SQL Server is going to have to figure out how many people live in Brisbane, Australia. Now, Brisbane is alphabetically in between Brazil. Did I got that right? Yeah, Brisbane is go over here. Brisbane, Australia, BRIS. So Bucharest, it's in between Brazil and Bucharest, which means that SQL Server says, well, Brisbane is in this bucket, but it's not Bucharest. SQL Server says the average location in this range is going to have about 13 people in it. Okay, let's go look at Brisbane. Copy. Let's try running this exact same query again up here. And instead of looking for London, let's look for Brisbane. And so here's where the problem comes in. SQL Server doesn't have enough statistics buckets to describe all the different population or all the different locations that people have. In this case, he estimated that only 13 rows would come back from Brisbane, Australia. You can update statistics all you want. You can do full scan all you want. That does not correct the problem of us only having 201 buckets in the histogram, so we get these kinds of outliers here. So how do we make that estimate more accurate? Now, in the case of this particular query, who gives a damn? It doesn't really matter all that much. But in larger real-world queries, that's where it starts to matter. When you, for example, join these people over to their posts or to their comments. How do I make that statistic more accurate? This is where filtered statistics could come in. I have to give a big disclaimer here because I hate filtered statistics. I think they're garbage. I don't think they really accomplish the problem that most people want to solve. Because after all, if I go look over at that top list on the left-hand side, there aren't enough ways for me to create filtered statistics for every one of these frickin' outliers. There are tens of thousands of different locations out there. In a perfect world, DBCC show statistics would show more than 201 buckets. In a perfect world, we would be allowed to configure more buckets, like Postgres does, for example. Postgres lets you choose how many buckets you want, regardless of the size of the data page. But in SQL Server, how would I want to fix this if I wanted to get that estimate on Brisbane, Australia to be more accurate and to say 1,310 rows instead of 13? Well, normally when you create statistics, you say create statistic, we'll call it location details, or we'll call it location BGO for my initials, on DBO users location. If I create that statistic just on the location column and I go to look at what the contents of what my manually created statistic was, location BGO, SQL Server only sampled the data. SQL Server didn't go through the entire table and read it row by row. So this statistic isn't any more accurate for Brisbane, Australia either. There's still not a separate bucket for Brisbane, Australia. So sometimes people will say, I need to update with full scan. Update statistics, DBO users with full scan. Let's go see, and what that tells SQL Server is, go read every single row in the table. And what's worse is it has to do this for every stat. If you have multiple statistics, this can take a while. That table's only 1 gigabyte in size, and yet it takes like 8 seconds in order to do this. That whole table fits in memory, and yet it still takes quite a while to run. Having done that, now let's go back and look at our newly manually created statistic, location BGO. It now sampled all 9 million rows. And if I scroll down and look at the buckets, looking for one for Brisbane, there still isn't one. There's Brazil, Brazil, and Bucharest. So I didn't fix the problem here. The idea behind filtered statistics is you're going to create a statistic, but instead of creating it on all locations, you're going to tell SQL Server exactly which locations you want to create the filtered stats on. I don't remember how this works. I'm going to say drop statistics location BGO on DBO users. And then I'm going to try to create, I did. Okay, I got to do it in that order. DBO users location, do it like that. And then off she goes. Now let's create the statistics filtered. I don't remember offhand how to do this, so I'm going to try to guess. Where location equals, and let's copy out Brisbane, Australia. Let's see if that works. I don't honestly remember if that's the syntax. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's fantastic. Okay, so I got lucky on that one, and it created a filtered statistics just on one row. Let's see what the contents of that looks like. And now I have something a little bit more accurate here. SQL Server looked at the locations where the location equals Brisbane. And you know what's messed up? He still only sampled 22 rows. God, that's so dumb. Really, he should have done that. Absolutely. So make sure, folks, I see a couple of you typing in questions. Make sure that you actually put your questions in with the question. Let me go grab it off the screen. It's over here. Let's see here. Grab the poll gab question and we'll put it over here. Paste. Just so that it's, I didn't copy it correctly. Hold on a second. Copy and then paste. Did I still not paste it right? Hold on a second here. Last time I'll try this. Poll gab. I can't copy it. That's interesting. Okay. Well, anyway, the over there, the URL for questions is over there. pollgab.com/room/Brento. Okay, so coming back over here. So if I say SQL Server only sampled a small percentage of the rows, and if I go look at the statistics, now SQL Server says that there are 1,193 rows that match Brisbane, Australia. So now if I go run that query again, now the estimates are more accurate. The creation of a filtered statistic made this more accurate. Now, here's the thing. Your question was, do I have to use full scan in order to get the filtered statistics to take? I didn't just now on the filtered stat creation, but I have a hunch that your question was about all of the statistics on the tables. So now I'm going to go through and redo the demo, but I'm going to do it again a little bit differently. This time I'm going to say drop indexes for starters. My drop indexes stored procedure not only drops the non-clustered indexes, it also drops any statistics, either system created or users created. So I've dropped all the statistics. Now I'm going to run, go show me all the users who live in Brisbane. And at the beginning, I've got a crappy estimate. SQL Server believed that only 144 rows of 1,300 rows actually matched. SQL Server believed only 144 rows would match. So here's the first part of the problem. That estimate's wrong. Now, you're saying if I create filtered stats, if I go create filtered stats on Brisbane, Australia, will that help? And let's go take a look. Let's go look at the execution plan, and they did. So the filtered, that's absolutely true, actually. My kitchen renovation is starting today, so I'm very excited about that. So now SQL Server used those filtered stats, even though the filtered stats weren't full scanned and the table stats weren't full scanned. And I'll prove it to you. Let's go look at the statistics on our filtered stat here. So here you see that rows sampled is a small number. SQL Server only sampled 22 rows. You see that that filter is, or that statistic is filtered. Then the other thing I want to show you is the auto-created stat. So if I go into Stack Overflow users statistics, so here is the auto-created statistic. I need to prove to you that that wasn't full scanned either. So let's say dbcc show statistics DBO users, and then we'll drag that stat name out so that we've got that. And then, oops, this. So the statistic on location, that wasn't full scanned either. So to answer your question, the reason that I did that big old complex demo there, to answer your questions, you said, when I'm doing filtered stats, do you basically have to use full scan? So not only do you not have to use full scan on the filtered statistic, you don't have to use filter or full scan on the regular statistic either, if your goal is to just get more accurate estimates. Now, I am not by any means saying that just all you have to do is create the stat and it'll be beautifully accurate. There are so many instances where statistics will give you the wrong answers, like I started out demoing with the Brisbane problem. In order to dig into those, go to our YouTube channel, go to YouTube and search for Brent Ozar Unlimited, and there is a whole one-day-long statistics class from Doug Lane. It's totally free. It's certainly not something that I would encourage people to start with for their first class, but it's something that if you like learning more about internals, then that's totally cool. All right, so that is the first answer. I'm actually going to run a 1-minute ad break, and then we'll go in and keep digging into your questions. This is the first time I've ever done this on Twitch in recent history. So we'll run a 1-minute ad break, and I'll be right back. I'll have a sip of my tasty beverage while that runs. I clicked the button. I have no idea how that's going. We'll see how it goes. Oh my God, I didn't even set a timer. Just in case you can actually still see me, I should totally set a timer. And just in case. Oh, I should look at whether or not it's showing anything on my... Oh, I guess I can't see because I'm logged in on my iPad, so I won't see on Twitch either. We'll see if you're seeing an ad, or let me know what you're seeing over on the Twitch stream. If you can still hear the sound of my melodious voice, let me know over in the chat, just out of curiosity. And then I'll go over and look at the next question that was in the list. Oh, Joris says no ad. I wonder if it's because you're like any kind of subscriber. First time chat, Dmanager said I had one ad and I'm back. Oh, okay, that's cool. Oh, and it says Twitch just gave me a thing that says it's had an ad break. Okay, cool. All right, so now George says, oh, admin. Might be because you're a moderator. That's still true. Okay, so next question that came out. Oh, this was a good one. Is there information in SQL Server that will tell us why it picked one index over another for a given query? All right, let's think about what needs to happen when SQL Server builds an execution plan. When SQL Server builds an execution plan, in a matter of milliseconds, it needs to be able to sketch out all kinds of things. It's really focused on building that execution plan and shipping it as quickly as possible so your query can start running. It's really optimized for that. It's not optimized for performance tuners to try to figure out how it made that decision. So there are things you can turn on They will slow things down, but there are things that you can turn on in order to understand that. To do it, let's go pop back over into a web browser. So for this one, I'm going to pop open Google, and I'm going to search for K-Taranov trace flag. Konstantin Taranov has this really cool list of trace flags, and I'm going to go post it over in the chat as well. So this is a list of SQL Server's trace flags. There are hundreds of these things if you go through and page down. Some of them will turn on behavior where SQL Server will output more data into the Messages tab of SQL Server Management Studio, explaining how it made some of the decisions that it made. Now, coming back to your question, come back over here. Coming back to your question, is it easy to read? Is it something that'll say, well, I chose this index because the stats were more select? No, that is not what it's all about. It's a list of decisions that SQL Server made, but it is not meant to be easily human readable. If you want to be able to parse the output, one of two things needs to happen. Either you need to open up your birth certificate and it needs to say Paul White on it, or else you need to go pick up the book Inside the Query Optimizer by Ben Navarez. It's one of the deepest books I've seen that explains the internals of how to read the output of stuff like that. I don't remember it myself. I don't use that because for me, it's more about understanding how SQL Server makes the decisions that it made and then being able to open up statistics and look at that and being able to just read the output of statistics and go, oh, I think the SQL Server thought this would be more selective or less selective than it actually is. So it's admirable. I can totally understand why you'd want it. I just haven't seen an easy to parse way of going through that. It's really kind of rocket surgery-ish. Ugh. All right, next up, let's see here. Ones that are hard, ones that take a while to answer, because I'll keep the shorter ones for I'm not quite sure. Part had a syntax error. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean there. Muppet asks, what's your favorite SSMS plugin? I don't use any. I don't use any because I am forced to jump from one customer to another rapid fire. And so as a result of that, I got to minimize the list of things that I ask a customer to install. Everything that I ask a customer to install ahead of time slows down their willingness to work with me. Like ideally, they want me to just parachute in and use T-SQL and that's the end of it. Not even install the first responder kit. There are all kinds of people who have all kinds of passionate feelings about the add-ons they love. I don't have anything against add-ons. If I was a full-time database administrator, again, at just one company with just one SSMS, I'm sure there are all kinds of things that I would install, but just because of my weirdo job, I don't get to do that. Next up, DBAInProgress says, what are the major gotchas of using TDE? Because it's one of those technologies that's been out for over a decade, Books Online is pretty good with this. You can pop open Books Online and go read through all the explanations about TDE, their performance drawbacks. But for me, it all just comes down to, does your company require it? If your company requires it, you have to use it. It's not like you can say, well, I need to go back to security and have them negotiate something. No, if your company requires it, you're going to have to use it. And it's going to have a performance overhead, and you're going to have to deal with that. That's something that you're going to have to take into account as you go and turn it on and you start to hit performance problems. You're going to have to roll through more hardware in order to handle it. But it's, just a requirement. That's just what you have to do. Let's see here. Anything else? Oh, Cannibal says, as someone who's stuck with a legacy application running on SQL Server 2008, go back and watch the beginnings of this broadcast. I covered that exact question. And then let's see here. Oh, there's a break-in again as well. Oh, that's interesting to hear. And then Dmitriy asks, how would I begin to optimize a reporting query that has no where clause, has a bunch of left joins to a bunch of other tables to foreign keys? The way that I would start optimizing is by attending my class, Fundamentals of Query Tuning. In the class, Fundamentals of Query Tuning, you learn the fundamentals of how to tune queries. Funny how that works. It'll teach you things like how you go about reading execution plans, what you look for in execution plans, and then when you've conquered that hill, you can go on to the class Mastering Query Tuning, which you can go into more details about reading execution plans, looking for anti-patterns, and making performance improvements to them. That is at BrentOzar.com. Go click Training up at the top. Enjoy. Now, the other way that I might answer that is it sounds like you're trying to throw the query under the bus. If you'd like to tune someone's skills or the business requirements that they're asking for, then send them to my class, Fundamentals of... No, that's the idea is if you don't like the query, you can either raise someone's skills or go back and ask for the business requirements. It sounds like you're asking that I think that, or what you're saying, I'm quoting you, I don't think that what they're asking for is fair or reasonable. Okay, go talk to them. But that's not a technological problem. That's a business problem, right? All right, so those are the long answer questions. Glad we ripped through those today. There's one more in here. I haven't had a chance to read through it yet. It's kind of got a whole lot of stuff going on. I have a clustered column store index that I created with drop existing max top 1 after having a clustered row store. Segments look good, but selecting by top 1000 by UTC date descending is very slow. So Columnstore isn't for top 1000 queries. Columnstore is really for reporting queries. When you write a report, you don't say, give me top 1000. You say group by, sum, windowing functions, averages, min, max. But as soon as you see queries that are a better fit for a transactional system, Columnstore isn't the answer that you want. Range queries like that, where they're probably getting things like top 1000 star, is a much better fit for a row store index. To learn more about whether or not column store indexes are a good fit for you, go to columnscore.com, like column store, but replace store with score, and take the 7-question quiz there, and that'll get you a good answer whether or not your column store implementations will be a success or failure. All right, so we'll stop there. Thanks for hanging out with me this morning. Now I got to go downstairs and check in on my kitchen renovation because the cabinets just got here yesterday and the contractors are trying to figure out. It seems like really simple to me. So I got custom cabinets ordered, and they go and ship all these custom cabinets to me. It took months before these things were made and shipped. And a truck comes and they start unpacking them, and there's a list of things they're supposed to deliver, and the number of boxes don't even match. Like they're supposed to be like 80 boxes, and in reality there are like 40 boxes. And I'm like, can you talk to me about this? And so now we're having to go back to the cabinet company again in order to go get the rest of the cabinets made up. I'm in Pacific time. All right, so thanks, and I will see y'all on the next office hours. Adios.